I think it's worth talking a little bit about some of the good news stories and the success that we've seen and the, I guess, the change that's taken place and the impact that we've seen that this work has had. It's, the impact has been on students, it's been on teachers, it's been on community, it's been on academic results, it's been on perceptions, processes. The Victoria Bernhardt model also includes demographics, but obviously demographics don't change too much beyond attendance. I guess for me, when we're in that final session where we get the leaders to share back their impact on the community, I know, Annalie, you're going to talk to a couple of those examples in a minute, but the highlight for me as well has really been them sharing what they've learned and what's kind of what the community and the culture in the school is like now compared to where they started. So I guess some of the things that we saw last year that people were talking to was the need for, I guess, adaptability and leadership, and the recognition that what they thought of at the beginning of the year and the plans they came up with in term one were not necessarily what exactly happened. Obviously, through the year, we're dealing with complex human beings. We're working in a complex system. It's never going to be as straightforward as saying in term one, well, this is what we're doing and this is how we're getting there, and then making the refinements. So it's really kind of lovely. It's been a place where people have been really open to changing and modifying as they get more information and they learn more and they do the work.
And I guess learning that that's the norm.
Absolutely.
Do you know of anywhere that you're able to say, hey, we're going to do this, and then you go straight through and you get it done? Like, there's no roadblocks or, speed bumps or anything. Like, that's not realistic. So for them to realise that, that change process is complicated and veers off all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it's just, and I think we've tried to build that space pretty actively where we've absolutely encouraged that, like something not working or needing to take more time, or actually what we thought we were going to do is not actually what we need to do. We need to go this direction. Like, all of that learning is absolutely part of the process. And it's almost like, we've said to them, if you didn't go that path first and recognize that it's wrong, you wouldn't know that this other kind of direction was more appropriate or a better fit. So you kind of got to go through all that and do the learning to get to this destination.
And that was the real highlight for me. Like, they obviously we did the summaries in the workshops, but then to choose a few to take that back to the principals network to share with the whole, all together. And it was really about what they'd learned as leaders. And I think that's setting a great precedent to say, we're on a journey and, there's all sorts of things that change and that we're part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's dynamic, it's evolving. Yeah, for sure.
And they also spoke to, that they had learned the importance of building capacities in others.
Yes.
And that they needed, that they were learning from other schools. So those elements are really exciting as well, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like the collaboration, I think, and that's what I was kind of saying before. I feel like there's almost a real learning culture in your school leaders, because it is they're not seeing themselves as the font of all knowledge and they're going back telling people what to do. Like, they're working in collaboration with their teams, they're working collaboratively with other leaders from other schools, but they're really actively trying to build capacity of the people that they work with. And I think we've also seen that in those meetings where it's not just the principal, the deputy, or, head of teaching and learning. It's like there's a year 3 teacher that comes along from one school, for example, because she's really interested in data and she's doing some amazing stuff in that school because they've given her the leg up and gone, well, actually, she's really interested and is going to add to this and help us move forward more quickly. Whereas in a historical leadership model, that wouldn't have happened, I don't think.
That's right, yeah. So it's rather than, as you said, them being the experts, they're incorporating, they're thinking about how to create that whole school culture.
Yeah.
Which means, supporting classroom teachers. And they did refer to that in feedback that, some of the impact has been on improved classroom culture, but more particularly improved community perceptions, increased parent participation and communication. So it's opening up, I think, opportunities to, as you said, create a really strong school culture that is about learning and moving forward and being open to change.
Yeah, absolutely. For students, some of the impact we've seen is around like student engagement and behaviour. So we had like 5 schools last year talk to the fact that it had impacted student behaviour and engagement really positively, which was awesome. And alongside that, then it was kind of another 4 schools that said that giving students a sense of achievement and progress. So we've talked about the data learning piece, yeah. But for schools who are at that point where we're seeing changes in learning analytics and academic improvement, they're sharing that data with students in some instances. And so the change and improvement that young people are making is more tangible and visible to them. So that was a really nice thing to be hearing. And I think last year was probably the first year we really heard that as explicitly as we did. But being able to kind of see that students are starting to see that change is so good.
In terms of having some highlights regarding schools and their projects, I guess, and the outcomes, did you want to talk to the secondary school, the remote secondary school?
Yeah, so look,
it's a remote Aboriginal school.
Yeah. So you're not allowed to have favourites, are you?
No, no favourites. We'll just talk about our favourites. Favourite projects.
Yes, favourite projects. No, so this school in a previous year had, one of the things they recognised was that there were gaps in access to some data around behaviour and engagement. And that's partly to do with internet access and reliability of internet and platforms.
Turnover of staff,
platforms.
Expertise staff being able to lead that,
Yep. And so they started to, in one of the years they worked with us, collect really great data. It was really interesting because the data actually really challenged some of the perceptions of staff. So they then, once they started collecting this kind of bank of data, were able to present back to teaching staff and break some of those perceptions. Like obviously there's always data that confirms what we know and what we experience, but there were some perceptions that were really challenged by it, which was great. And then there was
it also set some trends, didn't it? Like there was some identifiable insights that they could work with.
Yeah, and I mean, like most secondary schools across the country, year 9s were the most problematic. Year 9 boys, that's not surprising. But what they have done as a result, and as a result of listening to community, is they've decided they were in co-ed classes and the principal has kind of shuffled staffing around. So it was a challenge for him, but he managed to split the year 9s into a boys and girls class. And so it's based on community feedback. It's based on what was coming out of the data the previous year. And then the really great thing that they were then able to do in that subsequent year was then reflect on, well, has this split in classes in year 9 actually been beneficial?
And the original focus was because the boys were the least engaged.
Yes.
And there's lots of factors around that are different for urban schools. But, the girls were not so disengaged. However, that split, again, kind of inadvertently had a huge impact on the girls.
Yeah.
So right there, the numbers and attendance.
Yeah.
So they were focused on trying to support boys, but they also ended up impacting significantly girls' education.
Yeah. Yeah, so they went and spoke to students in semester 2 last year to get some feedback about what they were thinking and what they'd experienced, and literally every single student that they surveyed said that it was positive. And the really interesting thing that one of the leaders shared when he was sharing this information back to us, he said, I didn't actually ask them specifically about the gender split. I was asking about engagement in the school and participation in the school. And every one of them referenced the split of the boys and girls class, and is like that for us is a really key indicator that we've got this right, because it's something that they can recognise is different and it is working for them. It's certainly shaped the different programs that's on offer to the 2 different groups. So
subsequently after that split was looking at what next to support engagement. Yeah.
So the girls learning program has been tailored to girls, and the boys program is tailored to them. And so the engagement has been
not as a gender thing, but as their interests and what they're looking for post school.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what they've been able to see, like they can now talk to some significant improvements in engagement through attendance for some of their students, because there were students who were staying home because they didn't want to be in a class with boys, and the boys were staying out of class, and so they're actually coming to school a lot more than they were, which is so good. And they've even got now more girls considering vet programs in year 10 and onwards, than they have had in the last couple of years. So yeah, all round, it's just been a really positive impact. And then they've obviously also sought feedback from the community, and the community is really reaffirming that it's a great choice to split the groups.
Yeah, and they feel that they've also had more voice in the way that education runs in the community. So that's, because it's been consultative. So both the students and the community representatives have felt really connected to those changes as well, which is huge. A slightly different story for another secondary school, but an urban secondary school didn't have quite the same outcome. We referenced this the other day, but they came in midway through the year. Their goal had been to create consistent evidence-based pedagogy across all classes, because again, they'd identified that in the middle years there was less engagement. They achieved that through their data, through the Tell From Me survey, so they wanted to target that, and they said, well, one thing we can do is make sure we've got great pedagogy and that it's consistent, kids know what to expect. And so their action had been to develop a policy on pedagogy or pedagogical practice, and they had achieved that, and they released it to the staff and talked through it, and then they came in. Was it term 2 or 3 that they came in and went, yeah, that hasn't worked?
Yeah, I remember. I think it was term 2, because it was late term 2.
Yeah, and so they just recognised that, again, through perceptions, they'd done learning walks and talks, and so they'd been observing in conversation that there hadn't really been any change to pedagogical practice in the school. And as I said, that was really important learning for us. I just thought, first of all, that they were open to talking about it, but also to say, yeah, this is really important, that identify what's not working, not just to keep going. And I just thought it was amazing that they had the courage to say, this isn't working, we have to do something else. It was halfway through a project, that's brave. Yeah. So they did. So then the conversation was around, okay, well, what will work to support teachers in having consistent, effective practice instruction, So for me, that was a real highlight. And as I said, that was one of the turning points where we're like, we need more time for this. We need to explicitly have time to reflect and revise, because we don't want people just plowing through and getting to the end and going, well, that was a waste of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that was exciting.
Yeah, so for them, we were then talking about, well, how do you collect valid and reliable data about that experience for young people in the school, in classrooms, and the focus of the Tell Them From Me survey questions, they were focusing on that, the feedback piece from teachers. And so we talked through, like, how do you actually strategically and deliberately collect good evidence of whether or not there's feedback being given to students about their learning in the classroom. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see where they go this year with it.
And the other one was a primary school in remote, where they had, again, it was this 2-year kind of project, but particularly that they identified they had very scattered data because of turnover, because of lots of factors, and that conversation that for those kids there's no way to really support growth because they had no idea where they were at. But a really big struggle for that leadership team when they moved into that school, and so they had to identify first, I guess, what data. Anyway, their first project really was setting up a data dashboard. That was a couple of years ago, and then they focused on collecting that the data around English as an additional language and dialect, and really trying to target their understanding of the different areas and how to collect that data. And they were really excited by that, I think, and the fact that that's now led into this year, and having an EALD data wall, and being strategic in planning for meetings so that there's collaborative analysis and moderation. But it's big, and I think that's an example too of how long it can take. That's kind of 3 years in the making, and it was pretty frustrating for them at different points. And it was another moment where we had to say, look where you were 6 months ago, look where you were 12 months ago.
Yeah.
There's been significant change.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it needed so much work to get to a point of really being able to impact instruction and assessment and
there was all the piece around moderation. Remember, like once we actually brought the data together, they started going, hang on, well, how were they here 6 months ago, but they're now lower? And that does, I don't know that they've ever been at that level. So then there was all these really great.
And we suspect that the teachers don't know what it means to be emerging.
Yes.
So we're going to have to address that. Yeah.
There was really great conversations about the validity and reliability of the data. And then because it became more visible to everybody, they were like, oh, this actually has meaning. Like I'm not just assessing EALD for compliance and to tick a box. Like we're actually really actively looking for progress for students, and we can't talk about progress well if we've got inaccurate data previously. So
we're saying they're here and they're here, or we're saying they're here and they're here, because that happened too.
Absolutely, it did. Yeah, it happened every which way. So there was all this training around, as you say, like moderation and the meaning of the different levels, and then samples of work to match it. And your team did a whole stack of work to support them in that. But again, I'm really excited to see what that looks like this year, because they haven't had much turnover this year. So they've actually got people who have a good understanding now of what that looks like. And yeah, I'm just excited. Hopefully there'll be lots and lots of progress on the EA.
It's brave to say we're not finished yet.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
They could have gone really at the end of last year once they collected all that data and got it.
Yeah.
In a a usable state, they could have gone, okay, we're going to do this now.
Yeah.
So that was exciting. Did you want to talk to the urban primary school?
Are we going for too long?
Yes.
Really quickly, I will. If you're still listening at this point, well played. Urban primary school. Again, this was a couple of years in the making, where they were investigating, I guess, their levels of reading comprehension. They went to a science of reading model. They had really kind of different staff perceptions on science of reading. They were obviously trying to lead change, and they were kind of coming to us a few times a bit frustrated, I would say, because they were saying, look, we don't feel like we're having a lot of impact and we're not seeing a lot of change, and we've got a small group of people. Like they really worked with this small group of almost like those early adopters, and so there was some really great practice happening in pockets. They're like, we just don't feel like it's cohesive yet. And I don't really know what it was last year, but I think it was just sticking to their guns, providing the research for what they were doing, and they made, I guess, this data collection process school-wide, so it was no longer optional. It was everybody had to be involved in it. But I've seen this in a lot of data collection in schools where people don't really see the value of it to begin with. They do it once, and then once they do the assessment again in a couple of months' time, they can then see the change that students are making, and it's like they can see the progress, and then the staff members, like the buy-in just goes through the roof because they can tangibly see the change that's taking place. So it goes beyond anecdotally knowing, well, yeah, they're a better reader than they were 3 months ago. You can tangibly see actually how many levels they've improved, or
and then there's the questions around, well, what happened to enable that?
Yeah, and that's what they've done really well, because they've then started to make the data more and more visible, and they've got some data walls, and they've got a great Year 3 teacher who's leading a lot of that work, and the leadership team have been great in empowering her and encouraging her to do this work collaboratively with them, but they've really kind of empowered her. So she's
and it's really empowered them as a team.
Oh, big time.
Their data literacy. So again, compared to a couple of years ago when we went in last year and they've got their data wall, they were so excited about it. I'm like, you would not have been having this conversation a couple of years ago,
Yeah, and it's just been really nice as the outsider in all of this, just watching their professional growth as leaders as well, and the confidence of some of those leaders now, compared to 3 years ago, is like, it's like they're different people. It's
united them, like they're working so nicely together. It's been a lot of fun.
And it's, we always talk about at the end of the day, one of the reasons I love data so much, there's lots of reasons, but one of them is it's professionally rewarding. And so those leaders can now see the impact of all of that
work. What we've done has had an impact. That's the thing. Otherwise it is just assumptions and hope and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hope is not a strategy, as we know. Okay, we need to stop because we can't go through every single school in the system, but yeah, they've been 4 really great examples of primary and secondary.